Hello and welcome to this Price-A-Job tutorial. In this video we'll take a look at the Wall Finishes module in Price-A-Job. To access the Wall Finishes module, select the Internal Finishes category here in the module toolbar and select Wall Finishes. This provides you with a variety of options including Plasterboard to Studwork, Plastering, Dot and Daub walls, which is glued with thick plaster-like drywall adhesive, or Plasterboard on Battens, for damp walls prone to condensation in cold buildings. It doesn't really matter which one you select for now, because you'll be able to change the selection once we're inside the module. Let's start by taking a look at standard plasterboard on timber studwork, and click Create. Here we can input the area of our walls. We'll start with just 12 square meters. And be careful if you'll be plastering both sides of a wall that you include both sides. If you need help in calculating the area, you can use the area calculator by clicking on this button here, and this opens the area calculator. From here you can access the library, and Price-A-Job takes a look at your other modules that you've created for the external and internal walls, and shows them here. Here we can see the external walls and the internal walls. Alternately, if we set up our rooms here in the Room tab previously, we can access all those measurements here in the Rooms tab in the Area Calculator. And for each room, our walls area has already been calculated. So to add these to our calculator, we simply click on the plus button, and this adds these rooms to our Area Calculator. And then we can save. And this calculates our total square area, and we might just round this up to the nearest round figure. If we've made a mistake in choosing Plasterboard to Studwork, we can change the wall finish here from Plasterboard to Studwork to Plastering, Dot and Daub walls, or Plasterboard on Battens. Here we can select if this is a new installation or whether it's a replacement. If it's a replacement, our removal and disposal stage is added. Now we'll take a look at the stage for fixed plasterboard, and first we'll specify whether we're using one layer or two. 2 layers may be required for soundproofing or fire block, or other regulations. Here we can specify whether this is standard plasterboard, moisture resistant, Soundblock, Fireline, Insulated, or Vapour control. Under the cog settings, we can specify the screw and stud and battens spacing. By adjusting the spacing of the screws, Price-A-Job automatically updates the number of screws required for fixing the plasterboard. Next we'll take a look at skimming the walls. Here we can specify whether this is a full skim or just tape and jointing. Under the cog settings, the filler coverage is automatically supplied by the manufacturer's recommendations. For this example, let's choose a full skim. Under the cog settings, we can specify the thickness, and 3 mm would be standard. The plaster coverage is taken directly from the manufacturer's recommendations. You can override this if you prefer. If you won't be doing any skimming of the walls, you can simply deselect this stage. And this would include just the plasterboard. Under the accessories stage, we can click the box to select our bead and mesh. Here we have categories for plaster bead, primer, tape, drywall screws, and sealants. So let's add some silicone sealant and some mini mesh bead. And we'll close our accessories. And this is added to our estimate. Now usually a plastering job will require general labourers, and we can add as many general labourers as we'll have on the job site. And then here we can specify whether they'll be required for a number of days, weeks, or months, and the quantity of days that they'll be required for. 8 hours per day is the default, and you can override this if you choose. In the estimate pane, we can see a general labourers stage, and we can see that automatically the full quantity of 48 hours has been calculated, based on 2 labourers over 3 days at 8 hours a day. Now let's take a look at the removal and disposal stage. Here we can click the select box to open the Price-A-Job library. And here we have removal estimates for wall finishes and a variety of other removal and disposal categories. Under the wall finishes, we can remove plasterboard, plaster, cement rendering, ceramic or porcelain tiles, cladding, strip off wallpaper, or wall prep. For this example, let's say we'll be removing some plasterboard, and we'll set the area at 120 square meters. Price-A-Job automatically calculates the volume of waste to be disposed and recommends the removal method, in this case a 6-yard skip. The system also automatically updates the description to indicate that we'll be removing the plasterboard and disposing of the surplus materials. It notes that we have allowed for 0.8 of a 6-yard skip, and since that is impossible, we'll just round this up to the nearest whole number. 1 6-yard skip. Now if there is current masonry, then perhaps rather than plasterboard to studwork, we'll have to use plastering or dot and daub walls. Maybe even under certain circumstances, plasterboard on battens. If more than one wall finish will be required for a job, then we can change the title of this module to, for example, internal walls. And now what we can do is we can add a new module, and perhaps this one will just be plastering, and we'll change its title to external walls, and then we can use the area calculator, and we'll go to the library tab and look at our external walls and add that to our area calculator and save, and this updates our area from the external walls module that we already created previously. Alternately, you can just input the measured area. Next we'll take a look at the plastering wall stage, and here we can select the type of plaster. In this case we'll choose bonding. And here we have options for bonding, browning, or hardwall plaster. Under the cog settings, we can set the thickness, and the coverage is automatically supplied according to the manufacturer's recommendation. If you need to, you can adjust this for wastage or under or over usage. If you'll be finishing a garage wall, or any other situation that requires installation by regulation, then we can add a new module, and this time we'll use plasterboard on battens. Here we'll change the title to Garage Walls, and we'll set the area at 20 square meters. Here, under the Fix Batten stage, we can choose the battens that we'll be using, and we can specify the batten spacing. Under the cog settings, we can also adjust the fixings spacing if needed. For fixing the plasterboard, we can specify whether there's 1 or 2 layers, and the type of plasterboard we'll be using. Standard is the default, however for the garage, it's likely that we'll be choosing to use insulated. And you'll notice as you make the change, that PricerJob recognizes the thickness of the plasterboard you'll be using. For example, the insulated plasterboard will require drywall screws of 65 millimeters. If we were only installing the standard plasterboard, only 38mm drywall screws would be required. So for the garage, we'll keep this set at insulated plasterboard with the longer screws. And this is automatically factored into the costs. And because PricerJob does so much of the work for you, even in these small considerations, you can save loads of time and have much greater confidence in the estimates you'll produce. Next, let's take a look at dot and daub. This is when the plasterboard is glued to the existing wall with drywall adhesive. And again, we can specify the type of plasterboard that we'll be using. Under the cog settings, we can see the adhesive coverage in square meters per bag, and this is based on the manufacturer's recommendations. It should be noted that although we do include the option for vapor-controlled plasterboard here, this is typically foil-backed board, and should never be used for dot and dab walls, because although the drywall adhesive will adhere to the foil itself will simply peel off the board, and your plasterboard will end up falling on the floor. So in this case, moisture resistant might be a better choice. When we take a look at our reports tab, we can see that PricerJob has put together a nicely written quote for us. If we switch this to simple, it makes it much easier to notice our various wall finishes separated by the stud walls, the plaster walls, and the dot and daub walls that we created. And that's how to use the Wall Finishes module. Thank you for using PricerJob.